The gunshot echoed across the plains like thunder, followed by the hollow ping of a bullet striking the old tin can perched on the fence post. Tabitha Armstrong lowered the rifle, a thin smile crossing her lips as she squinted against the harsh Dakota Territory sunlight of 1876. Behind her, the joyful shrieks of children her sister's brood filled the autumn air, a constant reminder of what her 30 years of life had yet to provide her. "That's some fine shooting, Miss Armstrong," came a low voice from behind her. Tabitha turned to see Ethan Grayson dismounting from his chestnut mare, dust from the trail still clinging to his weathered denim and the brim of his wide-brimmed hat. At 35, Ethan had established himself as one of the territory's most respected cattle drivers, though rumors of a wilder past occasionally drifted through town like tumbleweeds. "Mr. Grayson," she acknowledged with a nod, resting the rifle against her shoulder. "I didn't realize you'd returned from the cattle drive." "Just rode in this morning." He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Your brother-in-law mentioned you were out here. Said you might be interested in selling some of your father's land." Tabitha's jaw tightened. "James has no right to discuss my affairs." "My apologies, then," Ethan said, replacing his hat. "I only—" Auntie Tab, Auntie Tab." The excited voices of her nieces and nephews interrupted as they raced around the corner of the barn, little Clara leading the charge with her brothers and sisters trailing behind. At 6 years old, she was the oldest of Margaret's 6 children and the most attached to her aunt. "Look what we found." Clara held up a spotted toad, her blue eyes wide with delight. Tabitha quickly set the rifle safely aside and knelt down. "My goodness, what a fine specimen. Where did you discover such a treasure?" "By the creek," piped up 4-year-old Samuel, while the twins, Anna and Alice, both 3, nodded enthusiastically. Little Joseph, barely 2, clung to his big sister's skirts, and baby Thomas, just 6 months old, was thankfully absent, presumably with their mother. Ethan watched the scene with a half-smile. "You have quite the way with children, Miss Armstrong." Tabitha felt a familiar ache in her chest. "They're good children. My sister Margaret has been blessed." "Auntie Tab, who's the man?" Clara asked boldly, staring up at Ethan with unabashed curiosity. "This is Mr. Grayson, Clara. He drives cattle." Tabitha straightened, brushing dust from her skirt. "Now, you should return that toad to his home. He has a family too, I expect." As the children reluctantly moved away, Tabitha turned back to Ethan. "I apologize for the interruption." "No need. It's nice to see children thriving out here. Too many don't make it." His expression darkened momentarily before he continued. "About the land." "I haven't decided to sell," she said firmly. "My father left it to me for a reason, Mr. Grayson." "Call me Ethan, please. And I understand. It's just that unclaimed land attracts attention these days, especially with the railroad expanding." Tabitha knew he was right. Since her father's death 2 years prior, she'd been fighting to maintain the small ranch adjacent to her sister's larger homestead. Without a husband or children, many in town viewed her as merely keeping the land warm until a suitable man came along to claim both it and her. "I appreciate your concern," she replied, "but I can manage." Ethan studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you can, Miss Armstrong, but should you ever need assistance with the land or otherwise, I'd be happy to help." "Tabitha," she offered, surprising herself, "if I'm to call you Ethan." A genuine smile crossed his face, creating creases around his eyes that spoke of years under the sun. "Tabitha, then." From the direction of the house, Margaret's voice called for the children. Tabitha glanced toward the sound, then back at Ethan. "I should return. My sister will be wondering where her children have gone." "Of course." He mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "Perhaps I'll see you in town on Sunday?" "Perhaps," she replied, unwilling to commit but finding herself strangely looking forward to the possibility. As Ethan rode away, Tabitha gathered the rifle and headed back toward her sister's house. The children had already run ahead, their excited chatter about the toad and the tall cowboy drifting back to her. The family homestead came into view, a sturdy two-story structure that James had expanded 3 times in the past 7 years to accommodate their growing family. Margaret stood on the porch, baby Thomas balanced on her hip, her once slender figure now permanently softened by motherhood. At 28, she was 2 years Tabitha's junior but seemed decades ahead in life's journey. "Was that Ethan Grayson I saw riding away?" Margaret asked as Tabitha climbed the porch steps. "It was. Apparently, your husband has been discussing my land with him." Margaret's face colored slightly. "James only wants what's best for you, Tab. A woman alone." "I'm hardly alone," Tabitha interrupted, setting the rifle carefully in the stand by the door. "I have all of you barely a quarter-mile away." "You know what I mean." Margaret shifted the baby to her other hip. "You need someone to share your life with, to build a family." The familiar pain twisted in Tabitha's chest. "Not every woman is meant for that path, Meg." "Nonsense. You just haven't given any man a proper chance." Margaret lowered her voice. "Ethan Grayson would be a fine match. He's established, respectable, and interested in my land, not me." Tabitha forced a smile and reached for baby Thomas. "Let me hold this little one while you finish dinner." Margaret surrendered the infant, but her concerned expression remained. "Promise me you'll at least consider coming to the harvest social next weekend. The new school teacher will be there." "I'll think about it," Tabitha conceded, knowing it was easier than arguing. As she cradled her nephew against her shoulder, inhaling his sweet scent, she pushed away the familiar mix of love and longing that always accompanied time with her sister's children. The Armstrong family dinner that evening was a chaotic affair, as it always was with 6 children under the age of 7. James dominated the conversation with talk of expanding their cattle operation, while Margaret orchestrated the feeding of their brood with practiced efficiency. Tabitha helped where she could, wiping sticky faces and cutting meat into manageable pieces, all while deflecting her brother-in-law's not-so-subtle hints about the benefits of selling her land to Ethan Grayson. "He's offering fair market value," James insisted as he carved another slice of roast. "Better than fair, actually." "The land isn't for sale, James," Tabitha repeated firmly. "Father left it to me, and I intend to make it work." "100 acres is too much for a single woman to manage," he countered. "I manage just fine." Margaret intervened, as she always did. "More potatoes, Tab? I tried that new method with the cream you suggested." Tabitha accepted the change of subject gratefully, though she noticed the look that passed between her sister and brother-in-law. They meant well, she knew. In their minds, her continued solitude at her age was approaching tragedy. After dinner, as Tabitha helped Margaret wash the dishes while James put the children to bed, her sister broached the subject again. "I worry about you, out there all alone." Tabitha sighed. "I'm hardly in the wilderness, Meg. I can see your chimney smoke from my porch." "That's not what I mean." Margaret's hands stilled in the wash basin. "I know how much you wanted children of your own." The familiar ache intensified. "That was a long time ago." 7 years isn't so very long. Margaret's voice softened. "What happened with William?" "Was God's will," Tabitha finished firmly, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Her engagement to William Cooper had ended abruptly when he'd been thrown from a horse 3 weeks before their wedding. The accident had left him with injuries that made having children impossible, and he'd released her from their engagement, believing she deserved a complete family. A year later, he'd married a widow with 3 children of her own and moved to California. "There are other men," Margaret persisted. "Ethan Grayson, for instance." "Is interested in acquiring more grazing land for his herd," Tabitha interrupted. "Nothing more." "I saw the way he looked at you at church last month." Tabitha shook her head, unwilling to admit she'd noticed those looks as well. Even if he were interested, which he isn't, I've made my peace with my situation, Meg. Not every woman is destined for motherhood. Margaret looked unconvinced but didn't press further. When the dishes were done, Tabitha kissed her sister's cheek and gathered her shawl. "You could stay," Margaret offered. "The spare room is always ready." "Thank you, but I prefer my own bed." Tabitha smiled. "I'll see you tomorrow for the canning." The walk back to her cabin was short but gave Tabitha time to breathe freely. She loved her sister and the children dearly, but the constant chaos of their household sometimes overwhelmed her. Her own small cabin, with its neat garden and modest chicken coop, offered a tranquility she had come to cherish. The cabin itself was simple, 2 rooms downstairs and a small loft above, but it was hers. Her father had built it as a wedding gift for her and William, and after his death, she'd made it her own. Shelves lined with books, a comfortable rocker by the hearth, and colorful quilts of her own making gave the space warmth that belied its solitary occupant. As she prepared for bed that night, Tabitha found her thoughts drifting to Ethan Grayson. There was something in his eyes, a quiet understanding that had stirred something long dormant within her. But she quickly dismissed the notion. Men like Ethan wanted wives who could give them sons to inherit their land and daughters to care for them in their old age. She had made her peace with her barrenness years ago, or so she told herself, as she blew out the lamp and closed her eyes against the darkness. The following week passed in a blur of autumn activities, harvesting the last of the garden vegetables, preserving food for winter, and helping Margaret prepare for the approaching cold months. Tabitha saw nothing of Ethan Grayson, though she found herself glancing toward the road more often than usual when she worked outside. Sunday morning arrived crisp and clear. Tabitha donned her best dress, a deep blue wool that Margaret insisted brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair carefully beneath her Sunday bonnet. Church was the social center of their small community, and though Tabitha often felt out of place among the families, her faith provided comfort she found nowhere else. The small white church was already filled with familiar faces when she arrived. She slipped into the pew beside Margaret and the children, nodding greeting to neighbors and friends. It wasn't until the service began that she noticed Ethan sitting several rows ahead, his broad shoulders unmistakable even from behind. Throughout Reverend Phillips's sermon on Ruth's devotion to Naomi, Tabitha found her attention wandering to Ethan's profile, visible when he turned slightly to speak to the young boy beside him, his foreman's son, she recalled. There was a gentleness in the way he helped the child find the correct hymn page that touched something deep within her. After the service, as the congregation spilled out into the churchyard for their weekly socializing, Tabitha found herself cornered by Widow Simmons, whose mission to pair off every unmarried person in the territory was relentless. "Miss Armstrong, have you met our new school teacher? Mr. Peterson is from Boston, and he's looking for suitable lodgings." The widow gestured toward a thin, nervous-looking man with spectacles who is currently being introduced to several other eligible ladies. "I'm afraid my cabin is quite small," Tabitha replied politely. "Perhaps the room above the mercantile would be more suitable." "Oh, I wasn't suggesting," Widow Simmons flustered, "though, of course, matrimony would solve the space issue quite nicely." Before Tabitha could formulate a response that wouldn't scandalize the older woman, a deep voice interrupted. "Miss Armstrong, I've been hoping to speak with you." Tabitha turned to find Ethan Grayson standing beside her, hat in hand. "Mr. Grayson," she acknowledged, unable to prevent the slight warmth that rose to her cheeks. "If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Simmons," Ethan said with a respectful nod to the widow, who retreated with poorly disguised satisfaction at this development. "Thank you for the rescue," Tabitha murmured when they were relatively alone. Ethan's mouth quirked. "The widow's matchmaking is legendary. I've managed to avoid her attentions thus far, but it's only a matter of time." "She means well," Tabitha defended, though she couldn't help the small smile that formed. Most people do. He glanced around the churchyard, then back to her. I was wondering if you might permit me to call on you this week. There's a matter I'd like to discuss. Tabitha's guard immediately rose. If it's about the land. It's not, he assured her quickly. At least, not in the way you're thinking. Curiosity overcame caution. Very well. Thursday afternoon would be convenient. The smile that transformed his face caught her off guard. Thursday it is, then. I look forward to it. Miss Armstrong. As he walked away to greet others, Margaret appeared at Tabitha's side, eyes wide with interest. What was that about? She demanded in a whisper. Ethan, Mr. Grayson is calling on Thursday to discuss something, Tabitha replied, striving for nonchalance. Calling on you? Margaret repeated, not bothering to hide her excitement. Oh, Tab, this is wonderful. We must freshen up your best dress, and perhaps I could send over some of my apple cake. It's likely about the land, Tabitha interrupted, though she wasn't convinced herself. Don't make more of it than it is. But Margaret's enthusiasm couldn't be dampened, and by the time Thursday arrived, Tabitha found herself unusually nervous. She had spent the morning cleaning the already tidy cabin, baking fresh bread, and changing her dress twice before settling on a simple russet-colored day dress that complemented her auburn hair. Precisely at 2 o'clock, the sound of hoofbeats announced Ethan's arrival. Tabitha smoothed her hair once more and opened the door before he could knock. Ethan stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking as nervous as she felt. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt crisp, and he'd even donned a vest that she suspected wasn't part of his usual attire. Miss Armstrong, he greeted her, thank you for receiving me. Please come in, Mr. Grayson. She stepped back, gesturing to the small sitting area. Would you care for some coffee? Or tea, perhaps? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. He entered, looking around the cabin with undisguised interest. You have a lovely home. Tabitha busied herself with the coffee pot, grateful for the distraction. It's small, but sufficient for my needs. It suits you, he observed. Everything has its place, but it feels welcoming, not stark. She glanced up, surprised by the perceptiveness of his comment. Thank you. Please, sit down. As she served the coffee and a plate of fresh bread with butter and preserves, Ethan seemed to gather his thoughts. When they were both seated, he cleared his throat. Miss Armstrong, Tabitha, I want to be direct with you. I've been thinking about your situation, and I have a proposition that might benefit us both. Her guard instantly rose. My situation? Your land, he clarified quickly. It's good land, with water rights and access to the new road, but it's also a lot for one person to manage alone. As I've said before, please, he interrupted gently, hear me out. I'm not suggesting you sell. What I'm proposing is a partnership. Tabitha blinked, caught off guard. A partnership? Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. I have more cattle than my current land can sustain, especially with the drought conditions to the south. Your land has excellent water access and grazing potential. I'm proposing that we combine our operations. You keep your land and independence, but my herd grazes there, and we share the profits. And what would I contribute beyond the land? She asked, intrigued despite herself. Your agricultural knowledge is well known. My cattle operation could benefit from more diverse planning, crop rotation, better hay storage. Things I know you understand from how you've maintained your garden and orchard. Tabitha considered his words carefully. It was a reasonable proposal, unexpected, but potentially beneficial. And the terms of this partnership? Ethan outlined a fair division of responsibilities and profits, clearly having given the matter considerable thought. As he spoke, Tabitha found herself impressed not only with the business acumen, but with his respect for her capabilities. Unlike James, who constantly underestimated her, Ethan seemed to value what she could bring to the arrangement. "I'll need time to consider," she said finally. "It's not a decision to make hastily." "Of course." He nodded, looking relieved that she hadn't dismissed the idea outright. "Take all the time you need." They finished their coffee, the conversation shifting to more general topics: the coming winter, local news, childhood memories of their respective upbringings in very different parts of the country. Ethan had grown up in Pennsylvania before heading west as a young man, while Tabitha had been born in Missouri and come to Dakota Territory with her parents and sister when she was 16. As he prepared to leave, Ethan paused at the door. "There's one more thing, Tabitha. The Harvest Social is this Saturday. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." The request took her by surprise and she hesitated. "I hadn't planned on attending." "Consider it a chance to discuss our potential partnership further," he suggested, though something in his eyes told her there was more to the invitation. Against her better judgment, Tabitha found herself nodding. "Very well. Thank you for the invitation." The smile that lit his face stayed with her long after he'd ridden away, and she found herself anticipating Saturday with unexpected eagerness. Margaret was ecstatic when Tabitha mentioned Ethan's invitation during their Friday quilting session. "I knew it!" she exclaimed, nearly stabbing herself with her needle in excitement. "He's interested in more than just your land, Tab." "It's a business discussion," Tabitha insisted, though she couldn't quite meet her sister's knowing gaze. "He's proposed a partnership for grazing his cattle." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Margaret teased. "Well, business or not, you'll need to look your best. The green dress? I think it brings out the auburn highlights in your hair." Despite her protests, Tabitha found herself enjoying Margaret's enthusiastic preparations. The sisters had always been close, despite their different paths in life, and there was something comforting about this familiar ritual of helping each other prepare for social events. Saturday evening arrived clear and cool, with a full harvest moon rising over the eastern plains. Tabitha wore the green dress as Margaret had suggested, with her mother's cameo pinned at her throat and her hair arranged in a simpler version of the current fashion. When Ethan arrived to escort her in his wagon, the appreciation in his eyes sent a warm flutter through her chest. "You look beautiful," he said simply, helping her up onto the seat. "Thank you." She settled her skirts around her, suddenly shy. "You're quite handsome yourself." And he was. Ethan had clearly made an effort, wearing a proper suit coat over his usual attire, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. The overall effect was striking, transforming the rugged cattleman into a gentleman who wouldn't have looked out of place in an Eastern drawing room. The town hall was decorated with autumn leaves, corn husks, and dozens of lanterns for the harvest social. Nearly everyone in the community had turned out, from the youngest infants to the eldest grandparents. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes while children darted between the adults' legs and tables laden with food lined the walls. Their entrance together caused a noticeable stir. Tabitha was accustomed to attending such gatherings alone or with her sister's family, and Ethan was known to keep to himself at social functions. Widow Simmons looked positively triumphant, while Margaret, already there with James and the children, caught Tabitha's eye and smiled encouragingly. "Would you care for some punch?" Ethan asked, seemingly oblivious to the attention they were receiving. "Yes, thank you." Tabitha welcomed the chance to compose herself while he fetched refreshments. The evening progressed pleasantly. They shared a plate of food, danced several sets together, Ethan proving surprisingly light on his feet for such a tall man, and managed to discuss some of the practical aspects of their potential partnership between social obligations. Tabitha found herself enjoying his company more than she had expected, appreciating his dry humor and thoughtful observations. During a break in the dancing, as they stood near an open window enjoying the cool night air, Ethan's expression grew more serious. There's something I need to tell you, Tabitha. Something that might affect your decision about our arrangement. She turned to him, concerned by his tone. What is it? Ethan hesitated, then spoke quietly. 7 years ago, I was in a serious accident during a cattle drive, a stampede. I was trapped beneath a fallen horse for several hours before my men found me. Tabitha's concern deepened. How terrible. Were you badly injured? I recovered mostly, but the doctor said. He paused, his jaw tightening. He said I would never father children. The injury was too severe. The revelation hit Tabitha like a physical blow. She stared at him, unable to form words. Ethan misinterpreted her silence. I understand if this changes your thinking about our partnership. Many would consider it deceptive not to mention such a thing up front, especially since most business arrangements in these parts eventually lead to more permanent connections. I wouldn't want you to feel, I can't have children either, she interrupted, the words escaping before she could stop them. It was Ethan's turn to stare. You. After 3 years of marriage, my sister bore 2 children. After 5, she had 4. Now, 7 years wed, she has 6 beautiful children. Tabitha's voice was barely above a whisper. I was engaged once. We tried, before the wedding, believing God would forgive our sin when we stood before Him as man and wife. But nothing came of it. Then William was injured, and he ended our engagement. But I know I've always known the true reason was my failure. Ethan's expression softened with understanding. Is that why you never married? Because you believed no man would want a wife who couldn't give him children? Tabitha nodded, unable to meet his gaze. What use is a barren woman to a man trying to build a legacy in this territory? Gently, Ethan touched her chin, lifting her face to meet his eyes. There are many kinds of legacies, Tabitha. Not all are written in bloodlines. The tenderness in his voice threatened to undo her completely. Before she could respond, little Clara appeared at her side, tugging at her skirt. Auntie Tab, will you and Mr. Grayson dance with us? Mr. Peterson is teaching us a new game. The moment broken, Tabitha managed a smile for her niece. Of course, darling. Lead the way. As they followed Clara to where the other children had gathered, Ethan's hand found the small of Tabitha's back, a gesture of support that spoke volumes. The touch lingered, warm and reassuring, as they joined the circle of laughing children. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of activity, more dancing, conversations with neighbors, and helping Margaret with the increasingly tired children. Throughout it all, Tabitha was acutely aware of Ethan's presence, his attentiveness, and the new understanding that hummed between them like a physical current. When it came time to leave, James offered to take Tabitha home with his family, but Ethan politely insisted on honoring his duty as her escort. The ride back to her cabin was quiet, both of them lost in thought as the wagon wheels creaked through the moonlit countryside. At her door, Ethan helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. I've enjoyed this evening very much, Tabitha. As have I, she admitted, her earlier vulnerability leaving her feeling both exposed and strangely liberated. About what we discussed earlier, he began. We both have had our disappointments, she said quietly. But perhaps you're right about different kinds of legacies. Ethan's expression softened. I'd like to call on you again if I may, not just to discuss cattle and grazing rights. Tabitha felt a smile forming. I'd like that too. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Good night, Tabitha. Good night, Ethan, she replied, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she watched him drive away, Tabitha felt something unfamiliar blossoming in her chest. Not quite hope, but perhaps its quieter cousin, possibility. The autumn weeks passed swiftly, bringing frost to the mornings and earlier sunsets. Ethan called on Tabitha regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, fresh honey from his hives, a handkerchief embroidered by the talented wife of one of his ranch hands. Their business discussions evolved into a formal agreement, with papers drawn up by the town lawyer detailing their partnership arrangement. But it was the personal relationship developing alongside the business one that truly transformed Tabitha's days. Ethan's quiet company, his respect for her opinions, and his subtle courtship awakened feelings she had long since buried. They spoke openly of their shared inability to have children, finding in each other understanding rather than judgment. "Have you ever considered that perhaps God had a different plan for us?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, a respectable distance between them on the bench. "What do you mean?" Tabitha wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the cooling air. "Your sister has been blessed with children to raise. Perhaps our blessing is different land to steward, knowledge to share with others, a different kind of contribution to make." Tabitha considered his words. "I've never thought of it that way. I've always seen it as lack something missing." "What if it's not missing, but different?" He turned to face her more fully. "What if, instead of a house full of children, we were meant to build something else together?" The implication of his words, the "we" and "together," hung in the air between them. Tabitha felt her heart quicken. "Ethan, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that I've grown to care for you deeply, Tabitha Armstrong." His voice was steady, though she could see the pulse jumping in his throat. "And I believe you feel something for me as well." "I do," she admitted softly. "More than I thought possible." He took her hand, his calloused thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I'm not a man for flowery words, but I know what I want, and that's a life with you beside me. Not because you can give me children, but because you give me something I've never had before: peace, understanding, a sense that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Tears pricked behind Tabitha's eyes. "I feel the same way. With you, I don't feel lacking or incomplete. I feel valued for who I am." "You are valued." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "More than you know. Tabitha, would you consider becoming my wife? Not for the practical advantages or to satisfy social expectations, but because I believe we could build a good life together." The tears spilled over then, trailing down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would be honored to be your wife." Ethan's smile was radiant as he leaned forward to seal their engagement with a tender kiss, their first proper one that carried the promise of many more to come. Margaret's reaction to their engagement was everything Tabitha had expected: tears, excitement, and immediate wedding planning. James seemed pleased as well, though Tabitha suspected his approval had more to do with the business advantages than romantic considerations. The children were simply delighted that their beloved Auntie Tab would be bringing the nice cowboy with the gentle hands and pocketful of peppermint sticks into the family. The wedding was set for December, before the worst of winter set in, but after the fall, work was completed. It would be a simple affair at the church, followed by a celebration at Margaret and James's home. As the date approached, Tabitha found herself wrapped in a quiet happiness she had never expected to experience. She and Ethan spent every available moment together, planning their future, combining their operations, and deepening their connection. They decided to make her cabin their home, with plans to expand it in the spring to better accommodate their needs. 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. A devastating fire broke out in the barn at Ethan's ranch, spreading quickly to the bunkhouse and main house. No lives were lost, thankfully, but the buildings were destroyed, along with much of the stored hay for winter. Tabitha found out when one of Ethan's ranch hands rode up to her cabin in the middle of the night. She didn't hesitate, throwing on her warmest clothes and riding back with him to find Ethan directing the salvage efforts, his face streaked with soot, his eyes haunted. "Tabitha," he said when he saw her, the relief in his voice palpable. "You shouldn't have come out in this cold." "Of course I came," she replied, dismounting and going to him. "Are you injured?" "No, just—" He gestured helplessly at the smoldering ruins of his home. "Everything's gone. The house, the barn, all the winter feed, the men's belongings. We managed to save the horses and most of the cattle, but—" Tabitha grasped his hands firmly. "We'll rebuild. Together." Ethan's expression was pained. "Tabitha, I have nothing to offer you now. The wedding." "We'll proceed as planned," she interrupted firmly. "Unless you've changed your mind about wanting to marry me." "God, no." His hands tightened around hers. "But I can't ask you to start our life together in these circumstances." "You're not asking. I'm telling you this changes nothing." She reached up to touch his smoke-stained face. "Your ranch hands need shelter, your cattle need feed, and you need rest. We'll solve this, Ethan. Starting now." The determination in her voice seemed to steady him. Together, they developed a plan. The ranch hands would temporarily stay in Tabitha's barn and the loft of her cabin. The cattle would be moved to her land immediately rather than waiting for spring as they'd planned. James reluctantly agreed to sell them hay from his surplus at a fair price. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The entire community rallied around them, a reminder of frontier solidarity in times of crisis. Men from neighboring ranches helped clear the burned buildings and salvage what could be saved. Women organized supplies and meals for the displaced workers. Even Widow Simmons contributed by opening her home to 2 of the older ranch hands. Through it all, Tabitha and Ethan worked side by side, their partnership deepening through adversity. She witnessed his leadership, his care for his men, and his resilience. He saw her practical problem-solving, her generosity, and her unwavering support. "You could have walked away," he said one evening as they sat exhausted by her hearth, the day's work finally done. "Many women would have." "I'm not many women," she replied simply. "And this is what partnership means, facing challenges together." Ethan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do," she countered, leaning into his embrace. "We deserve each other." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow blanketing the ground and making everything sparkle in the winter sunlight. Tabitha dressed in her mother's wedding gown, which Margaret had carefully altered to fit her slimmer frame. The cream-colored silk with its delicate lace overlay was old-fashioned but timeless, and when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she hardly recognized the radiant woman staring back. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, adjusting the small wreath of dried flowers and evergreen sprigs that crowned Tabitha's upswept hair. "Mother would be so proud." "Do you think so?" Tabitha asked softly, touching the cameo at her throat, another maternal heirloom. "I know so." Margaret's eyes glistened. "She always said you had a special path to follow. I think she knew it might not be the same as mine, but no less meaningful." The sisters embraced, careful not to crush the dress or disarrange Tabitha's hair. "Thank you for supporting me, Meg. Even when you didn't understand my choices. That's what sisters do." Margaret pulled back, dabbing at her eyes. "Now, let's get you to the church before Ethan thinks you've changed your mind." The small church was filled to capacity, decorated with pine boughs, red berries, and candles that cast a warm glow over the gathering. James escorted Tabitha down the aisle to where Ethan waited, looking handsome in his best suit, his expression transforming with wonder as he saw her. Reverend Phillips spoke of commitment, partnership, and God's diverse blessings for different lives. When it came time for their vows, Ethan and Tabitha had chosen to write their own, a somewhat unconventional choice that raised a few eyebrows but felt right to them both. "Tabitha," Ethan began, his voice steady and clear, "I come to you not seeking what you cannot give, but treasuring what you can. You've shown me that family means more than bloodlines, that legacy can be measured in love rather than lineage. I promise to honor your strength, to support your dreams, and to build a life of purpose with you. Whatever challenges come, we will face them together, as equal partners and true companions. Tears blurred Tabitha's vision as she spoke her own vows. Ethan, I never expected to find someone who would value me for exactly who I am. You've helped me see that what I once viewed as my greatest failure is simply part of a different path. I promise to stand beside you through all seasons, to create a home filled with love if not with children's laughter, and to never take for granted the gift of your understanding heart. You've given me peace when I thought I would never find it. When Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was both tender and triumphant, a seal on promises made not from obligation or necessity, but from genuine love and mutual respect. The celebration at Margaret and James's home afterward was joyful and warm. Clara appointed herself official hostess, proudly introducing Uncle Ethan to everyone who arrived, while the younger children darted about in excitement. Tabitha found herself constantly seeking Ethan's eyes across the room, still hardly believing that this good man was now her husband. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Ethan pulled her into a quiet corner. "Are you happy, Mrs. Grayson?" The new name sent a thrill through her. "Completely." "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He touched her cheek gently. "I was thinking about what you said in your vows about a home without children's laughter. It doesn't have to be that way, you know." Tabitha tilted her head questioningly. "There are children who need homes," he continued. "Orphans, like young Billy at the church. Children whose parents can't care for them. We may not be able to have children of our own, but perhaps, when we're settled." The possibility had never occurred to Tabitha, and it opened a door in her heart she had thought permanently closed. "You would want that? To raise children not of our blood? With you?" "Yes." His certainty was unwavering. "Not right away. We have enough to manage with rebuilding and combining our operations. But someday." Tabitha leaned into him, overwhelmed by the gift he was offering. "I would like that very much." As winter settled over the Dakota Territory, Tabitha and Ethan established their new life together in her small cabin. The quarters were cramped, with ranch hands still occupying the barn and loft while plans for rebuilding Ethan's ranch progressed, but the closeness only served to deepen their bond. They shared work, meals, conversation, and their bed, discovering in each other a passion neither had expected to find at their stage of life. Spring brought new beginnings. Construction began on the additions to their cabin, and the foundation was laid for a new ranch house on Ethan's property. Their combined cattle operation thrived, with Tabitha's agricultural knowledge proving invaluable in planning sustainable grazing rotations. They also made a decision that surprised many in the community they took in young Billy, the 10-year-old orphan who had been living with the church sexton since his parents' deaths from influenza the previous year. The arrangement began as temporary guardianship while the boy helped with spring calving, but it quickly became apparent that the three of them formed a natural family unit. Billy, bright and eager but wary from his losses, blossomed under Tabitha and Ethan's patient guidance. Tabitha taught him reading and arithmetic in the evenings, while Ethan shared ranching skills during the days. The boy's presence filled their home with exactly what Tabitha had once thought she would never experience: a child's energy, questions, growth, and yes, laughter. Summer brought more change. Word spread about the Graysons' willingness to give a home to an orphaned child, and Reverend Phillips approached them about two sisters, ages 6 and 8, whose mother had died in childbirth and whose father couldn't manage alone with a newborn and his grief. "We can't take them permanently," Tabitha explained to Ethan as they discussed the request. "Their father may recover and want them back." "But we can give them a safe place until then," Ethan replied. "Billy's already asking for siblings." And so Emma and Sarah joined their growing household, bringing hair ribbons, dolls, and girlish giggles to the expanded cabin. Tabitha found herself busier than she had ever been, managing the children, the household, and her share of the ranch work. But the satisfaction ran deeper than any fatigue. By fall, a year after the fire that had nearly derailed their wedding, the new ranch house on Ethan's property was complete, larger than his original home, designed with children in mind. There were 4 bedrooms upstairs, a spacious kitchen, and a large living area with built-in bookshelves that Ethan had insisted on for Tabitha's growing collection. The day they moved in, Billy raced from room to room, marveling at the space. The girls claimed their bedroom, arranging their few possessions with solemn care. And Tabitha stood in the center of the kitchen, hardly believing that this beautiful home belonged to them. "Do you approve, Mrs. Grayson?" Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning back against him. "More than I ever dreamed of having." "There's one more surprise," he said, taking her hand and leading her to what she had assumed was a storage room off the kitchen. When he opened the door, Tabitha gasped. Inside was a small but well-lit room with a desk, comfortable chair, and shelves lining the walls. "Your study," Ethan explained, "for your accounts, your reading, your correspondence with the agricultural college, your own space." Tears filled her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it to continue your research. Your methods for crop rotation have already improved our yields. Who knows what else you might discover, given the time and space to think." The respect in his voice, his genuine belief in her capabilities, moved her deeply. "Thank you for seeing me," she said simply. "For truly seeing who I am." He kissed her then, a kiss that still held all the passion of their early days, but now carried the deeper resonance of shared history and mutual understanding. That evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home watching Billy teach the girls to play catch in the yard, Tabitha felt a contentment she had never thought possible. Margaret had visited earlier, bringing a housewarming gift and all 6 of her children, who had run wild with their cousins, for so they all considered each other now, throughout the new house. "Your sister seemed happy for us," Ethan observed, his arm around Tabitha's shoulders. "She is. She was also a bit envious, I think?" Tabitha smiled at his questioning look. "Not of our circumstances, but of our peace. She loves her children fiercely, but 6 little ones leave little room for quiet moments like this." Ethan chuckled, watching as Billy patiently showed Sarah how to throw the ball again. "We've been blessed, haven't we? In unexpected ways." "We have." Tabitha followed his gaze to the children. "Not in the way we once thought we would be, but perhaps in the way we were meant to be all along." As twilight deepened around them, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "Tabitha, do you ever regret it? Not having children of your own, I mean." She considered the question carefully before answering. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like. But no, I don't regret the path that brought us here to each other, to these children who needed us. My sister bore 6 children. I bore none. But you gave me something equally precious." "What's that?" he asked softly. "Peace," she replied, echoing his words from their early courtship. "Understanding. A family built not from obligation but from choice, and that, my love, is the greatest blessing I could have asked for." Ethan's kiss was gentle, a reaffirmation of everything they had built together. Around them, the ranch settled into evening rhythms, cattle lowing in the distance, chickens roosting in the coop, Billy's laughter mingling with the girls as they played in the last light of day. Their home, their family, their legacy. Not the one they had once envisioned, but one infinitely precious in its uniqueness, a testament to the unexpected paths that love can take when given the chance to flourish on its own terms. 5 years later, their family had grown again. Billy, now 15, had become Ethan's right hand on the ranch, showing a natural talent for working with horses. Emma and Sarah had returned to their father after 2 years, once he had recovered from his grief and remarried a kind widow from a neighboring town, but they still visited regularly, considering the Grayson Ranch their second home. In their place came others, 3 brothers whose parents had died in a wagon accident, a quiet girl whose mother couldn't feed her after being abandoned by her husband, and most recently, twin infants left on the church steps with a note begging for a good home. Tabitha and Ethan never turned away a child in need, though some stayed only until relatives could be found or parents got back on their feet. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Tabitha's experimental crop rotations and Ethan's innovative cattle breeding program had made them one of the most successful operations in the territory. They employed several hands year-round now, including 2 former orphans who had grown up under their care and chosen to stay on as adults. Margaret and James remained their closest neighbors and dearest friends. Their 6 children, now ranging from 12 to 5, considered the Grayson Ranch a second home and thought nothing of the unconventional family their aunt and uncle had created. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, as winter settled over the land once more, Ethan arranged a special celebration. He sent all the children, current and former, to stay with Margaret and James for the night, and prepared a special dinner for just the 2 of them in their home. 10 years, Tabitha marveled as they sat before the fireplace after their meal, sharing a glass of rare wine Ethan had procured from the mercantile at considerable expense. Sometimes it feels like yesterday we stood in the church exchanging vows. And sometimes it feels like I've loved you my entire life, Ethan replied, taking her hand. At 45, his hair was liberally streaked with silver now, the lines around his eyes deeper, but he remained as handsome to her as the day they wed. Any regrets? She asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway. Only that I didn't find you sooner. He traced her wedding ring with his thumb. You've given me more than I ever thought possible, Tabitha. She smiled, thinking of the bustling, joy-filled home they had created. As have you. Do you remember what I said to you? That day by the fence when your sister's children were running wild around us? Ethan asked. You've said many things to me by fences, she teased. We do live on a ranch. He chuckled. Fair enough. But this was before we were married. You were watching your sister's children, and there was such longing in your eyes. I told you something that changed everything between us. Tabitha's expression softened with memory. You said, her sister bore 6 children, she bore none. She paused, her voice growing tender. You've given me peace, instead. And you have, he affirmed, leaning forward to kiss her gently. Every day, in 100 different ways, you've given me peace, understanding, purpose, love. As you have for me. She set down her wine glass to frame his face with her hands. We may not have the family we once expected, but we have the one we were meant to have. And it's more beautiful than I could have imagined. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting past the windows to blanket the ranch in pristine white. Tomorrow, the children would return, filling the house with noise and activity. There would be chores to do, lessons to teach, meals to prepare. But tonight belonged to just the 2 of them, a celebration of the unexpected journey that had brought them together, and the unconventional family they had built from love rather than blood. As Ethan drew her into his arms, Tabitha reflected on the long path that had led her here from a young woman who believed her worth was tied to her ability to bear children, to a woman who had mothered more children than her sister, though none from her own body. A woman who had found, in the most unexpected place, exactly the life she was meant to live. Her sister had borne 6 children. She had borne none. But in the arms of the man she loved, Surrounded by the legacy they had built together, Tabitha Grayson had found a fulfillment that transcended conventional expectations, and in that discovery lay the greatest peace of all.